Welcome to the Launch Lab podcast, another episode with myself as a host, and this time we have Victoria, who is a Launch Lab members.
Yeah, a pleasure to be here.
Can you introduce yourself?
So I'm Victoria Omobuwajo. I'm CEO and founder of Sunmo. We sell a health and wellness range of products. Our first hero product is our plantain crisps, which we launch into Selfridges, Whole Foods Market and Sainsbury's. And we also are now launching the new range of products, which is our health and wellness powders, which help you to feel good, drink well and do good, essentially.
I wanted to focus with you on today's episode on the power of press, the PR side.
Yeah.
I know that you have kind of some history. You are on the Gordon Ramsay show. We're going to touch on that. You were on Forbes. You had, you are quite successful at managing your brand, and I know that this is something not most founders are comfortable with. Before we go into that, can you, talk us a bit more about Sunmo? What's their vision, mission, kind of like basics of the company? What is Sunmo?
Yeah, so Sunmo, it grew from my personal passion of cooking and bringing people together. And over the years, it's actually developed based on my personal ethos to eat good. I realised how important it is to nourish our bodies with food that gives us energy, that keeps us full for longer, that just makes sure you are ready for the day and you're healing your body. I recognise how powerful food can be in healing yourself. Personally, I suffered with eczema when I was younger, and it was certain ingredients like neem leaf that really helped to heal my body. So I put that into my business, and my personal ethos is eat good, feel good, do good. So that's where Sunmo kind of stems from, my passion for cooking alongside the importance of eating healthy.
Interesting. So basically you are saying that Sunmo it looks like it's something very personal. It's not like those kind of business where it's like business, personal life. Like it looks like Sunmo is something very like who has deep root in your childhood.
Yes, absolutely, it did. Yeah.
Even the name, I think it means something
in Yoruba, yes, it does. Yeah, so a lot of the brand, even down to, I guess, the packaging, it's very bold and black, and it's very East London. So everything about the brand really comes from my background and my personal morals and moral compass, I guess. So, yeah.
Can we focus a bit more? I'd like to shift gears and focus on the press side.
Yeah.
I know that you have been quite successful at managing your PR.
Yes.
You have some big names behind you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Gordon Ramsay. Can you share a bit more about this to our audience? And because for me personally, those kind of like shows, Gordon Ramsay, Forbes, like only those mystery people, or like you need to be co-opted, or you need to know people, like, but you look very humble, very come from East London.
Yeah.
How did you end up there? What's Power of Press? And
So I think that, so with the Gordon Ramsay show, I was actually in the launch lab and I received the email that this show is happening.
From who?
I don't even remember.
It's just
honestly
a random newsletter you subscribed.
Yeah, one of the staff members, I think, having known that we had already launched into Selfridges, we had already launched into Sainsbury's, so having known that my brand was gaining success, getting traction, I believe that someone mentioned to a staff member in the launch lab, do you have any foodies in the lab that could apply for this show? So I received the email. I actually applied a day before the deadline. Yeah. So I applied a day before the deadline and I was like, okay, just get this done. I got a phone call the very next day from the executive producer. They was like, yep, it was around COVID times, so we're going to do a video interview for you tomorrow. Like, they briefed me. They was like, we really like your application. So are you ready for a video interview? So I think, even though, one thing I will say is, even though you may think you have to be this, I guess, megastar to be on TV, or have a, I don't know, you might think you have to, like, to go on an apprentice, you must be able to pitch amazingly. Of course, I'm I enjoy pitching, I enjoy those things. But I think authenticity goes a long way. That's probably one of the reasons Gordon invested in me. On the show, we had what was called a grilling. And, you know, as much as I try and speak very well, I was like, I'm from East London. Like, I'm never going to shake the accent.
Yeah.
That's just me. And he was like, well, I'm Scottish. Like, do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. What can you do and what can you achieve? So it's just, I think he saw what I've done in my business and how much I want to go for it and how far he believes I can take the business. And that's what works. So, yeah.
So just to understand your journey into press, this was
Yeah.
an email, you're just like
Yeah.
kind of, there's a part of luck in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting because I think it's important to share also that PR plays a role, but it's accessible. Would you
Yes.
say that?
Yes. So, you know, PR does play a role. So in the early stages of the business, we also hired a PR agency to get into publications like Evening Standard and things like that, which for the most part, that helped with us posting it on social media and people seeing, oh, okay, this is a brand that people, it added some credibility to the brand. So when we was talking to Selfridges, they saw, oh, okay, they've been featured in Evening Standard, they've been featured in Women's Health, so they must be a serious brand for us to list. But yeah, then organic PR is so important. Like from the back of the show, it being on BBC One, we had so much sales. So the sales went through the roof. And you know, I walk around and people recognise me and things like that. So it's such a great way for you to get your brand and your name out there and to make more money in your business, essentially.
It's very interesting that you manage to leverage press to your advantage. However, that's my personal kind of experience, I feel that some of the startups I advise, they leverage it in the wrong way.
Really?
And I think that, I don't know, feel free to share your thought, but it looks like if you can leverage it right, like the way you did, having a product and growing it organically, then it works. But some startups, it feels like because they have a failed idea, they try to like just, add a layer of PR and just invest into something that in itself doesn't have any value. And that's why I was like interested to get your journey on that, because I think that this is not really the common path. Most founders end up getting a random email from, oh, I can get you in this mail, this newsletter, paying hundreds of
so much money on it,
and nothing is coming out of it. How do you make the difference between what is essentially good PR and bad PR and scam PR?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you need to know what your PR is going to be used for. So the Gordon Ramsay show, of course, that was a financial investment. I got the investment for my business.
How much?
£150,000. I also got the publicity from the show, so I knew that would be one, it will generate revenue for the company because people will see it on TV, Google me. I made sure that my social media had my brand in the bio so that people go straight to our Instagram and purchase products. So I knew that would generate revenue and also make the brand people more aware of the brand. And if I did win, which I did, thankfully, I'd also get the investment. Things like PR such as magazines and things like that, I think sometimes people think it will get them sales, but I don't necessarily think they always convert to sales. So for when we was doing magazine PR, I knew that it would be an opportunity for me to pitch that to the retailers. So when Sainsbury's asks, oh, okay, how much are you investing in marketing and how well known is your brand, I'll show them the Evening Standard article, I'll show them a Metro article. So it wasn't more so a sales grab, it was more so a get a retailer on board. So I think if you know what you're using your PR for, you can really use it in the right way and use it to your advantage.
would this be your advice for any startup seeking press coverage for the first time?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know of minimum PR, you can probably have to spend about £3,000 a month, right? Yeah. Just to get in a couple of articles. So yeah, my advice would be you need to know exactly what you're using this PR for. There's no point of investing £3,000 a month for probably minimum 3 months and thinking it's going to make you £3,000 because it probably won't. You'll probably only use it to spread brand awareness or to, like we did, get a retailer to want to list you.
Can you tell us a bit more about the Forbes? Yeah. Well, your name being in the Forbes magazine.
So Forbes, they sent me a DM on Instagram. It was after the show. One of the, I believe, writers for the magazine reached out and she was just very interested in my story. I think that's another thing I would advise to entrepreneurs is to put your story out there. You know, on Instagram, I tend to do, okay, this is the story, this is how the brand was created, just videos showing my journey essentially and showing the successes each way along the way, even the small successes, like we've just done a trade show. Thankfully, it was like, oh, we did a trade show, then Selfridges was at the trade show, we launched into Selfridges, did another one, launched into Sainsbury's, so it was a very, people could see the journey and follow along. But yeah, she must have seen me on the show and then I think she saw some of my Instagram posts and she said, yeah, we would like to run an interview for you. Could you send us an article on you? Can you send us a press release? So I sent her a press release and they pretty much said everything that I gave them in the article for Forbes. What I will say is, again, PR doesn't always go the way you want it. Even though some of the things I didn't say, like the title of the article was, I don't care about the investment money, which obviously I do. So you can't always, I think also press and PR, they will write what sells. So if it's like, oh, okay, this could be controversial, they would write about it and you can't control the narrative all the time. So it was a very controversial title, which I can't do anything about, but it was very good for publicity anyway.
What all of those press and PR attention you got planned at the early stage of Sunmo? We're gonna touch on it, but you mentioned at the intro your background on, well, you had a financial background, and then you started just following your passion.
Yeah.
How much of a planning did you had on press and PR, and how much was it just hard work meeting opportunity?
That's a good question. So when I first started my Sunmo journey, I didn't plan to have publicity at all. I more so planned, okay, I want a route to market. So whereas people may say, oh, you're very fortunate to have Selfridges as your first store, that was something I did plan. So I said, okay, we will go into Selfridges first, Whole Foods Market, Sainsbury's, because I saw it as an easy way for us to gain traction. You know, Sainsbury's, meeting their orders is a lot harder than meeting Selfridges orders. And also the credibility behind being in Selfridges, it kind of helps you get that Sainsbury's listing. So I planned that route to market out and how we'll get sales and the financial forecasting, planned all that out. The PR side of things, I genuinely didn't say, okay, I think my only goal actually was, okay, I want to be in Forbes before I was 30 years old. And I think it was just like, you see everyone, oh, Forbes 30 under 30. I was like, oh, I want that. So that was literally the only thing. So I was very happy I was able to achieve that. But other than that, I didn't, you know, plan that I was going to go into BBC, on TV or anything like that. It was very organic and I just saw the opportunities as they came and took advantage of them.
What would be your advice on early startup? Looking for PR and trying to get some publicity or media coverage.
Yeah.
Because my understanding from your journey is that actually you get the most attention when you don't look for it. So for you, it looks like it was more along your way to your customer. You tripped into like kind of having all of those opportunities. But what would be your advice to someone who is actually looking for media coverage?
I think, for me it was very natural. However, I do think it's a good idea to plan it out. So, you know, going into the show, I reckon you should know exactly what your intentions are, plan out what you want to do when you come off of the show, if you want to do more TV shows and things like that. So that would be my advice, because national coverage is so good for business. It's amazing. Sometimes I bump into people and they're like, oh, I know that brand. Like, I know your brand, you're Sunmo, right? And I'm like, yeah. And I don't know where they've seen it, but they must have seen it on TV or on social media or something. So I would say always have a plan for maybe going viral on Twitter. I found that helped us a lot. I did a post when we launched into Sainsbury's. I did a post about the launch, and I think it was just it was such a startling image to see someone quite young launch her products into Sainsbury's. I don't think that's done before. I think I was probably one of the youngest women to do it. So I got a DM from 10 Downing Street. So I think those things you should really plan out. So as soon as you are going to launch in somewhere, plan out going viral on social media, putting out certain articles, putting out certain posts. You should definitely plan it, because PR and content is such a great sales tool these days. So yeah, I would plan it out and not just leave it to, I guess, being a natural organic thing that happens.
So how do you make the difference between the part where it's more luck or because I'm sure that some of the coverage you got was not planned, because you can't plan everything, all the opportunities, but some must be planned. So how, because I'm as I said, like, I've encountered more founders who are like either wasting money, not spending on PR, and some of them like getting trapped on those scam. Oh, I'm gonna get you on The Guardian in like 2 days if you pay X, Y, and Z. And that's one of the reasons I also wanted to have you on the show, to kind of like demystify the path and help founders not get scammed.
Absolutely.
How do you make the difference between the good and bad, and what needs to be planned and what needs to be like,
I think, especially in the early stages, I personally wouldn't advise any startups to invest in, let's say, PR, like those emails that you get where it's like, oh, we're going to give you an article in The Guardian or whatever. They're just such a cash grab, and it doesn't really equate to much. PR such as being on a really good podcast or having a viral post, these things are quite cheap, essentially. So I would definitely plan that out. You know, plan out a strategy for, okay, I'm going to do this post about us launching, having a pop-up event, or us launching our products into this amazing retailer, or us launching our new product that has all of these amazing features. So those really cheap ways of posting and getting PR, like content on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, I would definitely invest in that. Articles in newspapers, they can be so expensive and not always worth it, I personally think. So yeah.
So can I summarize saying that good PR is free PR? Or would you say that bad PR is when you need to pay? Is it what you're trying to say, or is there a different, or am I making a shortcut?
I guess so. For me, all of the most profitable PR, so just from my personal experience, the most profitable PR that we've had has been, Twitter posts, Instagram posts, which were all free. If you count, I guess, the time to take the picture, then. But most of the pictures were taken on my iPhone and things like that, so that's quite free. And then, of course, the BBC show was free. I actually got paid to do it. So, yeah, all of the great PR that we've got has been completely free, or I've actually been paid for it.
My kind of personal take as well, we talked a lot about PR, but I think that it only works to a certain level where you do have a good enough story before even having a product, because
that's
Sunmo is a story before a product.
Yeah.
On top of that, you have an excellent product, and then you can leverage something that you have. But you already did the famous 0 to 1, so you are like multiplying 1, you're not multiplying 0.
Yeah.
And I think that so many founders think that they can outweigh their, well, lack of product or lack of practical solution to any problem by wasting their time
just
and
throwing money at it.
on PR, and it doesn't work. The only way, as you were saying, is like when you already have made this journey from the 0 to 1, then you can leverage press.
That's very true. That's very true.
You can't do it the other way around. Like press is only gonna, you can't cover up an empty bucket with press. Like it needs to be filled with something, with substance. Like you don't need PR to actually say the story of like, oh, Sunmo, this means this in my language. I'm from East London.
Absolutely.
And you see what I mean? Like this personal journey is like sellable because there is content and substance.
Absolutely.
But I assume that you must have like, I think the part where maybe we haven't covered yet is all of those groundwork, those kind of like lonely work where you are like pushing it. I think that people realize that PR may be a like enabler, but what they don't realize is that all of those hidden part where you were just relying on
working on. Absolutely, it's so true. Touch on that. So when I first started the business, I was doing an internship in a private bank, and you're absolutely right. Like I was working so hard. I had to be in the office around 7 a.m. So I was doing market stores. So the brand started doing market stores, Old Spitalfields Market, and not making very much money. And I would make all of the products by hand. So this is hours and hours of like making crisps. You can imagine it was so taxing. So I remember at the beginning hiring a commercial kitchen and just having boxes and boxes of plantain that I would cut and pack, and it took me hours. So I would be there from 2 a.m. to around 6 a.m. Hardly getting any sleep, then go to the office, then after working, maybe have an event that I would go to. So when I actually got my first set of investment, I was at a crossroads where I felt as though I was going to give up on the business. I felt as though I was going to go completely into finance. So my first investor was a mentor at the bank that I worked at. And I was just asking her, how do you think I can progress in my career? What advice would you give me? And she's giving me all of this advice. And then she was like, oh, so what do you do outside of work? And I was like, oh, I just have this plantain thing that I do. Like, I was trying to just forget about it, and I just wanted her to move on, change the subject. She was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, how much money do you make? And I was like, oh, I make like £200 per event, like a market store that I do. It's very, very little money. And she was like, okay, I'm going to invest in you. But that also, like you mentioned, it goes with the groundwork. She saw me pitch at company events and me put myself out there. She kind of probably saw the grind that I was doing. You know, we already had packaging, even though it was all handmade. She must have seen the passion that I had already put into it and the passion I put into my work when I was working in finance as well. So she kind of bought into me as a person and my personal story. So I think that authenticity and that story of how much work you've put in can really sell. And a lot of founders, when they're starting out, they'll think, okay, what do I have? I don't have an interesting story. You know, I haven't launched into Selfridges, I haven't launched into Forbes, but that story in itself was very powerful, and it is for a lot of people, that you've gone from having £0 to £200 and you've put the work in and you've been waking up early and you've been doing it all by yourself and you've perfected your pitch and things like that. That's also a very strong story. So I would definitely advise people to see what they have and to utilise it, because it's interesting to a lot of people, even if you haven't made £1 million yet, type of thing. So yeah, so she invested, and then that really helped us to launch into the retailers.
Can you now tell us a bit more about the controversial side of PR, where you said, because in the end, media is it's like any media, press, news, cable, whatever. It's just a company here to make money.
Yeah.
So you need to, when you start seeing press through this lens, I would like to come back to when you said they're going to do something that is going to attract attention and try to be a bit more controversial.
Yeah.
How do you make the difference between when it's a good time to talk on something, when it can backfire? How do you leverage? Because you need to have a strong sense of politics in some way.
It's a hard one because some people say all press is good press, right? All publicity is good publicity.
Is it true?
I think it depends how ready you are for it. So, for example, when I did the Gordon Ramsay show, one of the big reasons why I was making headlines was because I had a disagreement with a very strong character on the show. And even though I would say I'm probably very softly spoken, you know, I just get on with my work and I'm not trying to trouble anyone. She had it out for me. Like, she didn't like me and she made it very clear. But I'm also not someone who backs down. So that was, you know, it was the big old Victoria and said person are clashing. So that made a lot of the headlines. And I think that's put my name out there a lot. But I think for me, it was good because I didn't do anything to aggravate the situation. I was just trying to make sure we win as a team and we are successful in our challenges and stuff. Whereas I think it shone her in a very negative light. And she got a lot of hate on social media. She got a lot of hate on Twitter. And it was like, I don't know whether that was good for her business, because people started leaving negative Google reviews and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say all publicity, like bad publicity, because she was just made out to be the villain, essentially. Whereas for me, I was authentic to myself, and I'm not a horrible person, so it didn't affect, for the most part, people was like, oh, I don't know why you didn't thump her in the face type of thing, like, don't know why you didn't slap her. So I think that you have to just be a morally sound person, and you know, publicity can paint you out to be a bad person, but you just need to stay true to who you are. I wouldn't say you should actively seek bad publicity. It sells a lot more, but I don't think you should go out of your way to be that villain or that controversial character. And yeah, it's just not within me to kind of have a horrible story like, oh, I'm an aggressive person or whatever. So I don't know whether all publicity is good publicity. I think especially when you're starting out, you kind of just want to stay true to who you are, and hopefully that works for you. But for example, the Forbes magazine, the headline was very controversial. It was kind of like, I don't care about the money, and you know, it's just. But what I was saying was that having Gordon Ramsay as an investor in my business is so much more powerful than the money. But they've put a clickbaity, eye-catching headline just to get people to want to read it. So you can't control that, really.
Yeah, so that was a part where I wanted to touch on, because PR, for me, the way I see it is, it's way more, I would say even the word dangerous in some way, because as you said, first, not all PR is good PR. Second, there is kind of like, you can't always trust whoever is going to do the coverage. So in your case, you were in good faith, but I assume that you didn't know that they were twisting your words.
Yeah, no.
What would you have done differently if you had a chance?
I don't think you can control it. I genuinely don't think you can control it. On the show, I'm happy with the way that it panned out. The article, you know, you can say, I don't like flowers, and they're like, oh, she hates flowers so much, she's an anti, do you know what I mean? People can twist whatever for whatever they want. You can't control your narrative to some extent. You can only be true to who you are. And And yeah, so I don't think there's anything that you can particularly do. I think you can, if you are paying for PR, then you can probably say, okay, you want to make sure it's tailored to look like this, this and this. But yeah, I genuinely don't think you can kind of, especially when you're on a show where there's other editors, as participants, we can't tell them to edit us in a certain light. They will just do whatever they like. So it's a risk that you just take. And either you say, okay, I don't want to take the risk, so I'm not going to do it, or you just take the risk, and however the BBC want to edit you or the magazines want to edit what you've said, you can't do anything about it.
Did you had any kind of legal assistance, or were you thinking for some?
So yes, so with the contracts, so like for example, the talent contract, I got a lawyer for that. With like articles such as Forbes, I imagine if they do put out an article and you know that it is tarnishing to your brand or to your name, you could probably ask them to take it down. It wasn't tarnishing because the actual content of the article was very good. It was just a catchy headline, right? So yeah, essentially you could probably, if it's like defamatory, you can probably ask them to take it down and get that taken down. But thank goodness that hasn't happened to me as of yet, and everything has been very positive. I think also sometimes these controversial articles can bring awareness to you, and then when people do start to search for you, they realise it was just a controversial article, that they'll see your presence, they'll see what you've done, and they're like, oh, actually, this is an amazing person who I want to support. So it can bring eyes to you, and then you can use those eyes for a positive thing. So you can control your own narrative in that sense.
We talked a lot about Sunmo, food. However, it's not your primary background. Can you share with our audience your primarily more the finance side? I know that you worked in like big names before embarking on this journey, and also like helping us understand why, while you are in a very comfortable position working in financial sector in the city, and yet kind of throwing everything out for starting a food business. For some people, it would be like the dream of their life would be to just end up in one of those names, and you're like, oh, you know what, I'm like tired, I'm like just going on my own ways. You see what I mean? Like, help us understand what happened.
So I studied accounting and finance at Bayes Business School,
which is for those who don't know, Bayes like retwisted their name, so it
used to be Cass. Yeah, absolutely. Cass Business School. Interestingly enough, I went to Sir John Cass Secondary School as well. So I think for me it was always, I was very passionate about maths from a very young age. So going into finance was, I guess, the norm for me. It would have just flowed very easily. But another passion of mine was always to be an entrepreneur. Like I looked up to Alan Sugar and those types of entrepreneurs, Richard Branson. So it was always within me that I felt as though I was going to be an entrepreneur. I remember getting my GCSEs. I did very well, but I actually didn't want to go to college. I was like, okay. And it was the teachers that saw my grades that I was like, no, you have to continue with college, you're doing so well. But inside of me, I always felt like I just want to start a business, and that was, I don't know where it stemmed from, but it was always within me. I think also what happened was, around when I was in secondary school, there was the financial crisis, and it just seemed as though a finance job or these jobs in the city weren't stable jobs to have. So I think that really swayed my viewpoint on them, and I was like, okay, what can I do that's I control my own destiny and I'm not just fired because there's a crisis or something like that. So I always saw entrepreneurship as a way for me to control being able to make money and not just getting fired from a job, essentially. But yeah, I did go to uni and I did continue with college. And I actually did accounting and finance at a business school because I wanted to go into business. So it was always, my path was always swerved towards being an entrepreneur anyway. So I did continue with my job, because as much as you want to be an entrepreneur, you need the money, you need the financial backing, you need to have a great idea and you need to have a great plan and execution. So whereas I needed money, I just did finance as a way to make money essentially. And when I was able to raise investment was when I just focused completely on my business.
Would you advise any young founder to secure a proper track record as an employee or within an organization before jumping in, or would you have maybe started earlier if you could have?
That's a good question. So I think it depends on the individual. If you're a self-starter from a very early age, then just continue doing that. For me, university really helped me to expand my knowledge, make contacts. So that was the perfect path for me. Even though I wanted to be an entrepreneur, just being a self-starter to this point where I could push myself to create financial forecasts and to gain the accounting knowledge to get investment. I tried it outside of university and I didn't really get very far. But like, for example, the first investors I got, as much as they wanted to invest in me, they wanted to see financial forecasts. How am I going to make this happen? And I leaned on my knowledge from university to produce these documents. So without having gone and studied accounting and finance, having 3-year financial forecasts, I probably wasn't going to be able to do them. But if you are a self-starter, you can learn this outside of uni. You don't have to kind of go to study to do it. You can learn how to set up your business without going to business school, essentially. So, I think it's just based on your individual path. I think one good thing about university is it pushes you beyond your limits. So it's like if you've got a personal trainer and you're doing certain exercises, the personal trainer is going to push you a bit further. So for me, that's what studying at business school did for me.
I think that my understanding is more that you were like kind of on a track, but you always felt that there was this kind of frustration that, well, you're like put in a box, because ultimately that's how a society works. You need to put people in a box, otherwise the system doesn't work. You know, and I'm sure that even with your team or your employee, or well, you need to put people on a system, otherwise the system doesn't work.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing is that you had this frustration of feeling like, wait, I don't belong in this. Like, I want to be like the master of my own time.
Destiny.
And, yeah, kind of this. And it's not just you. Like, we've interviewed other members of the lab, those are not. And just kind of the resonating message is that it looks like whatever business you are in, whether it's health tech, food, conversational AI, or insurtech, or whatever, most of the Launch Lab members, they all had this kind of drive to be like owner of their own time.
Yeah.
You know, just like, I think that's what makes this kind of space a Launch Lab. And that's one of the reasons why we embarked on this Launch Lab podcast, just to share a bit more of those kind of stories, because it's not, when you have this kind of like comfortable lifestyle with big names and kind of social caliber, you're like, oh, why would I bother? But in the end, it's like, you're just like, you don't choose to be an entrepreneur, you're just like, you just feel that there is something pushing you towards it, and you just can't find peace until you're like...
Absolutely, it's true. And I think that's the thing. I loved working in finance, like absolutely loved it. Like if I was to go back, perfect, chef's kiss. However, there is like a bigger draw to have control of your time, to be there. My personal, even though I don't have children yet, my personal draw was I wanted to be able to be there for my future family. So if there's a parents' evening, an event, a concert, I want to be able to control my own time. So I'm not like stuck with a job that demands most of my time, as finance does. But I can say, okay, actually, I'm delegating this to someone else. I need to be here for my children or my husband or whatever. So that was my personal draw, having control of my own time, absolutely.
Looking back at it, was it a good trade-off? Because I assume, like in my case, it was more like I've worked for a short period of time in a big firm as well. Money was very good, but the time wasn't here because you sell all of your time. And now I've got way more time, but obviously you don't automatically get the same rate as you used to.
Yeah.
How would you feel? Because I assume that you could make, or you could have made way more money and have climbed the social ladder. What's your take on that? Do you regret? Would you have to, if you had to do it again?
Yeah.
What would you have done differently between your financial career and starting
a business? Yeah. I think that because I burnt out very early on, so I was working and studying and doing my business at the same time. I think what I would have done was...
How old were you when you did that?
I was around 25-ish. Yeah, like 25, 26. I think what I would have done was continue my high-paying job and then done my business. But the time when I was studying, I wouldn't have worked because, yeah, you do burn out. I did burn out many times. Now I've got a lot more balance. But I think it does get very hard. And yeah, there were times I was like, okay, I should have just continued working in finance because these hard times, I wouldn't have faced them. I'll just be able to...
You mean financially?
Yeah, financially, absolutely. Because as much as I got investment for the business, it didn't pay me a salary. So I had to depend on working other jobs, which wasn't my finance job, just so that I can pay my rent and things like that. So what I would have done differently was continue with my finance job whilst I was setting up the business. Yeah, absolutely. Which is it's a juggling act, especially at the beginning. It's very much a juggling act, and you don't get the same salary as you did. Or what I maybe would have done was jump into the business after saving a considerable amount of money, so that those savings can take me for the next couple of, let's say, 6 months or something, and then embark on my business full time.
Victoria, can you help us wrap up with a final take on entrepreneurship, maybe more generally, or if you want to be more specific on the way you handle press and your personal branding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a personal takeaway would be, especially if you're, actually at any age, but if you're young and you've got an idea, you've got a passion, fulfill it. I think the main thing is you don't want to look back and regret. You don't want to say, oh, I could have done this. And, at any stage where, I think, for example, it was when I was working in finance and I hadn't got investment, the idea of someone giving me money for a percentage of my business was absurd. I was like, how am I going to do this? I see it on TV, I see it on Dragon's Den, but can someone actually give me tens of thousands of pounds, hundreds of thousands of pounds for an idea, essentially? And I think you just have to believe that it can happen to you. Like, I'm from East London. Do you know what I mean? I'm not anything. I went to public school. I grew up in a single parent household. There's nothing I would say remotely like, oh, I'm from Harvard or something that would say, oh, Gordon Ramsay's going to invest in you. You're going to get hundreds of thousands of pounds for your business. No one would, I would guess, plan that for me. Do you know what I mean? Or expect someone like me to achieve that. So you have to believe in yourself, but you also have to put the work in. You have to put in the hours and make a solid plan and put in the work as well. So yeah, that's the advice I would give. You can achieve, if I can achieve it, of course you can achieve it too.
Yeah, I can definitely feel this. I think maybe, I don't know if that's what they saw in you, but I could really take on the level of sincerity, even when you talk, and it really looks like you're not like thinking twice about, like, you're just saying things and this is who I am, I've done that, I'm not ashamed of anything and going for it, whether you like me or not.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best takeaway to wrap up on. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Victoria, for being with us today. And I'll see you on our next episode.